My name is Emily. I was born when my parents were in their 40s and already had a 13-year-old daughter named Laura. Laura was the pride of the family, and to them she was enough. We never planned to have a second child, my mom often said, not with malice but without hiding the truth either. In moments like that I would stay silent, fully aware that my existence came from the urging of my maternal grandparents. They were the only ones in the family excited about my arrival, having pleaded with my parents to have another granddaughter. But to my parents, I was merely a responsibility they were forced to bear. By the time I was born, Laura was already a teenager absorbed in her own world, hanging out with friends, preparing for SATs, and having endless conversations about college. I can't recall a single time when Laura genuinely paid attention to me. She wasn't mean, but she acted as if I didn't exist. While I played with my dolls alone in the corner of the living room, Laura would lounge on the sofa, engrossed in phone conversations with her friends. Laura, don't forget your SAT books, my mom would remind her, carefully packing them into her bag. Meanwhile, I sat quietly at the dining table with my math homework in front of me, waiting for someone to notice that I also needed help. But no one ever did. My parents quickly established a routine that shaped my entire childhood. Every morning they dropped me off at my grandparents' house before heading to work. "Here's your little one," my dad would say to my grandpa, jingling his keys as if he couldn't wait to hand me over. My grandparents' home became my true refuge. They picked me up from school, helped me with my homework, took me to the park, and always made sure I was well fed. I found myself late at night. My parents would come to get me, often looking tired and slightly irritated by the obligation. "Emily, you're the best thing that ever happened to us," my grandma would whisper as she hugged me tightly. In those moments, I almost forgot what it felt like to be rejected by my parents. At home, however, life was a constant reminder that I was an unnecessary child. When Laura left for college, I hoped, just a little, that my parents might finally pay more attention to me. I was wrong. "Emily, clean the bathroom," my mom called out as soon as I walked through the door after school. All of Laura's old household chores were passed down to me, along with a slew of new ones. I quickly adapted to doing laundry, cleaning, and eventually cooking. When I turned 15, my mom abruptly declared, "You're old enough now. From now on, you'll handle dinner." And that's how I started learning to fend for myself in the kitchen, teaching myself to cook. From simple dishes like spaghetti, to more elaborate meals. All to serve my parents. My life became an endless cycle of responsibilities and indifference. My parents only saw my worth through the chores I completed, and even when I did everything perfectly, they never expressed satisfaction or genuine interest in me. I grew used to being overlooked in my own home, though deep down, I always held on to the hope that one day, they would change. But that day never came. My maternal grandparents, Harold and Margaret, were the guiding light in the otherwise gloomy days of my childhood. Every morning when my parents dropped me off at their house, a wave of relief washed over me. It was the only place where I truly felt loved. "Emily, you're a little angel," Grandma Margaret would often say, gently stroking my hair. She had a way of making me feel special, even when the rest of the world seemed to see me as a burden. Grandpa Harold was the most patient person I've ever known. During afternoons spent working on homework at the dining table, he would sit beside me, carefully guiding me through each number and calculation. "You're doing great," he would say, his eyes sparkling with pride whenever I solved a difficult math problem. To my grandparents, I wasn't the forgotten child. I was the heart of the warm, loving world they had created. When this physical world went away, on weekends they would always take me to the park or the library. Those were rare moments when I experienced true joy, laughing and playing without worrying about the endless chores waiting for me at home. I still remember the time Grandpa Harold took me to a small bakery near their house. "Emily, would you like to try this?" he asked, pointing to a cupcake topped with a swirl of frosting. It was the first time I felt that someone genuinely wanted to make me happy. When they settled on a loaf, Grandma Margaret also taught me how to care for the flowers in her little garden. "See, Emily? Flowers need love and care just like people do," she said, carefully pulling out weeds. Every time I saw the flowers bloom, I felt a sense of peace. As if the wind carried my worries away. My grandparents didn't just give me love, they also taught me invaluable lessons. Emily, life isn't always easy, but you have to learn to stand tall, Grandpa Harold would say during our heart-to-heart talks. They weren't wealthy, but they always saved what they could so I wouldn't lack anything. Grandma Margaret often told me that from the day I was born, they had opened a small savings account for me, just in case Emily ever needs it. I didn't know then how that money would later change my life, but I did know that their love and sacrifices made me feel incredibly fortunate. The years I spent at their house were not only a refuge from my troubled childhood, but also a foundation for the person I would become. While my parents saw me as a responsibility, my grandparents saw me as their pride and joy. They taught me to be strong, grateful, and never to give up, no matter how hard life became. One day, I asked Grandma Margaret why they loved me so much. She simply smiled and replied, "Because you deserve it, Emily. You're a gift that heaven sent to us." Those words etched themselves into my heart and became a source of strength that would help me overcome challenges in the years to come. Whenever I came home from a long day at school and saw their radiant smiles welcoming me, I knew I had found where I truly belonged. It wasn't the house where I was born, but in my grandparents' home I learned what unconditional love really meant. Those memories didn't just help me endure the hardest parts of my childhood, they became a beacon of hope that would guide me through the darkest moments of my life. Everything we teach about love, it's the wind that never ends, and so every one of us deserves an opportunity to manifest those lessons. When I graduated from high school, with excellent grades and 3 acceptance letters from top universities, I had hoped that my efforts would finally be recognized. I held the letters in my hands, filled with pride and excitement. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I thought my parents would finally see my worth. But I was wrong. That evening, I placed the 3 letters on the dining table and shared the news with my parents. "I got accepted into NYU, UCLA, and Michigan State," I said, unable to hide my excitement. Their response, however, left me stunned. My mom, not even bothering to look up from her plate, simply said, "That's good news, but we don't have the money to pay for your college." I froze. "But Mom, you paid for Laura's college, and even spent thousands of dollars on her wedding," I protested, my voice trembling. She shrugged, her tone indifferent. "Laura's different. We saw potential in her." The words pierced me like a knife. Everything I had done, all the late nights studying and sacrifices to achieve top grades, was dismissed with a cold, simple statement. My dad added, "If you really want to go to college, get a job and take care of yourself. Adults take responsibility for their own lives." I didn't say another word for the rest of the evening. After dinner, I went to my room, tears streaming silently down my face. I couldn't believe that the people who gave me life could be so heartless. The next morning, I gathered the courage to call Grandma Margaret and tell her everything. She listened quietly, and then said, "Emily, come over right now, we need to talk." When I walked through their door, Grandma Margaret was already waiting, her arms wide open to embrace me. "We knew this day would come," she said, her voice warm but firm. I looked at her in confusion. Grandpa Harold emerged from his office holding an old briefcase. "Sweetheart, we've been preparing for this day for a long time," he said, opening the case to reveal a stack of bank. Grandma Margaret explained. "When you were little, we started saving. We knew your parents wouldn't treat you the same as Laura, and we couldn't let you be disadvantaged." Each number on those papers was a testament to their love and foresight. "This money is enough for you to attend any university you choose," Grandpa Harold said, his eyes full of hope. I couldn't hold back my tears. "You did all this for me?" I choked out. "Of course, Emily," Grandma Margaret replied, her eyes shining. "You deserve the best." Thanks to their savings, I decided to attend New York University, where I knew I could pursue my dream of a career in finance. The days leading up to my move were busy, and my grandparents were by my side every step of the way, helping me fill out forms, buy supplies, and get everything ready. My parents barely showed any interest. Do whatever you want, my mom said dismissively, when I informed her of my decision. On my first day walking through the university campus, I felt as though a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Every step I took on the brick path leading to the lecture halls was a step away from the shadows of neglect and injustice. I made a promise to myself that I would never waste the sacrifices my grandparents had made for me. I would live a life that would make them proud, because I knew that everything I had achieved was thanks to their unconditional love. My college years at New York University marked a major turning point in my life. Leaving behind a cold, unjust home, I began a new chapter where I could truly be myself. On my first day of class, I carried not only my dreams but also the hopes and love that my grandparents had instilled in me. I reminded myself that I could not afford to let them down. College life wasn't easy, but I loved every moment of it. Every lecture and project was a challenge I embraced with enthusiasm. Late nights spent studying in the library didn't discourage me, instead, they fueled my determination. I frequently called my grandparents to share small classroom victories, and every time, they cheered me on with warm encouragement. "You are our greatest pride, Emily," Grandpa Harold once said during a phone call, his voice filled with pride. The Americano classic was my favorite. Those words became a source of strength, helping me get through even the toughest days. In my sophomore year, I started an internship at a small financial firm. It was my first opportunity to apply what I had learned, and I quickly discovered I had a talent for financial analysis. "Emily, you have a rare gift for logical thinking," my supervisor told me during a midterm evaluation. That compliment reassured me that I was on the right path. By my final year, I had secured an internship at one of the largest financial firms in New York. The job provided not only valuable experience but also important connections. I worked harder than ever, not just to prove myself, but to feel deserving of the sacrifices my grandparents had made for me. When I graduated with honors and received a job offer from the company I had interned with, I knew I had achieved something I once thought impossible. During this time, my relationship with my parents grew increasingly distant. They rarely called to check in, and I didn't feel compelled to reach out either. My sister Laura occasionally sent short messages about her family's financial struggles with her husband James. Each time I read those messages, I felt a cold detachment. The pain that had once haunted me was gone, replaced by an acceptance that the gap between us was inevitable. In contrast, my bond with Grandma Margaret and Grandpa Harold remained as strong as ever. I frequently visited them during school breaks, bringing stories of my work and life. The warm dinners at their home were moments of true belonging. No pressure, no expectations, just pure, sincere love. Grandpa Harold often said, "Seeing you now, I know everything we did was worth it." Those words always brought tears to my eyes, reminding me that they were my true family. My career at the financial firm began to stabilize, and within 3 years I was promoted to project manager. The high salary and generous bonuses allowed me to purchase a small apartment in Manhattan, a dream I had never dared to imagine. On the day I moved in, I invited my grandparents to my housewarming party. Grandpa Harold looked around the apartment and smiled. "Emily, you did it! This is the result of all the hard work you've put in." Standing in my own apartment, seeing the pride in my grandparents' eyes, I knew I had not only overcome my past, but also built a bright future. I made a promise to myself that the love and values my grandparents had taught me would always guide me. They had given me more than just support. They had given me the foundation to thrive, and the belief that I could accomplish anything. The greatest loss of my life occurred one early autumn day when I received a call from the hospital. Grandpa Harold had suffered a severe heart attack and didn't survive. I rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. He had passed away peacefully in his sleep, his face serene as if he were dreaming of something beautiful. I collapsed under the weight of the news. He had always been by my side, the one who taught me how to face life with strength. And now? He was gone. Grandma Margaret was devastated by the loss. After more than 50 years by his side, she seemed to lose much of her will to live. I did my best to support her, but just 2 months later, she too left me forever. It was a time when I felt as if my entire world had crumbled. I had lost the 2 people who loved me most, and showed me what unconditional love truly meant. After the funeral, their lawyer invited me to his office to read their will. I knew my grandparents wanted to protect me, but I didn't expect that they had left everything to me. The house where I had grown up and a $250,000 savings account were entrusted to me, along with a handwritten letter from Grandpa Harold. In the letter, he wrote, "Emily, you are our greatest pride. What we've left behind is not just material wealth, but our belief that you will continue to live a life of dignity and purpose. Use this to build the future you deserve." I read the letter through tears, feeling the immense love and faith they had placed in me. Meanwhile, my sister Laura's life was falling apart. Her husband James lost his job and couldn't find stable work. Laura's career in marketing hadn't turned out the way she had hoped. With 2 young children and mounting debts, they were forced to move back in with our parents. The house that had once been cold and unwelcoming to me was now overcrowded and chaotic, with 4 additional people. It became a giant undercrowded, a type of depression that lasted into the midst. So, 2 years later, after my sister's recovery, I heard about this through mutual acquaintances, but no one from the family reached out to share their struggles or seek comfort. One day, my parents unexpectedly showed up at my apartment door, looking exhausted and drained. They sat down and began talking about Laura and James's hardships. "They can't afford their rent, and we're running out of money too," my mom said, her eyes filled with hope. "Emily, can you help? Your niece and nephew need a stable home." I sat silently for a long moment, as memories of my cold, neglected childhood flashed through my mind. Finally, I replied, "I'm sorry, but I can't help. Everything I have is thanks to Grandma and Grandpa, and I intend to honor their wishes by using it to build the future they wanted for me." My parents left, visibly disappointed and bitter. Not long after, Laura called me, accusing me of being selfish and heartless, but I knew I had made the right decision. The love my grandparents had given me was something I couldn't betray by handing it over to people who had never valued me. I decided to sell the house my grandparents had left me and use the funds to invest in my own business. I opened a small financial consulting firm focused on helping people like my grandparents, working-class families in need of guidance to manage their finances and secure their futures. Every day at work, I thought of Grandma and Grandpa, of their quiet sacrifices and boundless love. Their legacy became my motivation, driving me to create something meaningful that would endure. Through my efforts, I sought to honor them, not just in memory, but through the lives I helped improve, inspired by the love they had given me. After selling my grandparents' house, I used the money to buy a new home, a place I hoped would be the start of my fully independent life. It was a charming house in the suburbs with a spacious yard and a peaceful atmosphere. I had considered inviting my parents and Laura over to mend our relationship, but before I could do so, something happened that shattered any hope of reconciliation. The moment the change forever started afresh, but when it did, I smiled and nodded at Noah. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a post from Laura. The words felt like a slap to the face. "Can't wait for the housewarming party this weekend at my parents' gorgeous new home. So grateful I could help make it happen." The post included pictures of the house I had just bought, decorated with balloons and a lavish party setup. I froze, feeling an overwhelming sense of betrayal. At first, I couldn't believe it. I called my mom, trying to stay calm. "Mom, I just saw Laura's post. Are you having a housewarming party at my house?" I asked. There was a brief pause before she responded. "Well, Emily, we just wanted to throw a small gathering. You've been so busy, so we didn't want to bother you," she said softly. But the lie in her words made my blood boil. I drove to the house immediately. As I pulled up, I heard music and laughter coming from inside. I walked through the unlocked front door and was stunned by what I saw. The house I had bought through my hard work was filled with strangers. My dad stood in the center of the living room, cheerfully chatting with a group of guests. "We're so proud of this new home," he announced loudly, "and we have to thank our wonderful daughter Laura for helping with the finances." I stepped further into the room and his voice faltered when he saw me. All eyes turned toward me. "Emily," my dad tried to compose himself, but I had reached my breaking point. I think there's been a misunderstanding, I said firmly, my voice cutting through the room. This house is mine. I bought it with my own money. Neither Laura nor anyone else had any part in that. The room fell into an awkward silence. Laura's face flushed as she stared at the floor, and my mom avoided eye contact. Emily, we were just trying to have a family gathering, she began, but I didn't let her finish. A family gathering where I wasn't even invited? And you lied, claiming Laura helped buy this house? This is beyond unacceptable. I turned to the guests. Thank you for coming, but this party is over. Please leave my house. The crowd quietly gathered their things and left without a word. My parents and Laura were the last to leave, their expressions a mixture of guilt and resentment. Just before walking out the door, my mom turned to me and said, "You're being incredibly selfish, Emily." I didn't respond. I simply closed the door behind them. That night I sat alone in the empty house, my mind racing with conflicting emotions. I knew I had done the right thing, but the pain of my family's betrayal cut deep. This house had once been a symbol of my success, but now it was a painful reminder of the irreparable rift between me and the people who had given me life. After a sleepless night of reflection, I made a decision. I would sell the house. Not because I was weak, but because I wanted to free myself from the painful memories it now held. I needed a fresh start in a new place, one untainted by the wounds of my family's betrayal. It was time to move forward, leaving the past behind, and building a future free from their shadow. After selling the house, I felt as though a tremendous weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The money from the sale was deposited into my savings account not just as a preparation for the future, but also as a reminder of the independence I had built with my own efforts. I made the difficult decision to cut all contact with my parents and Laura. It wasn't easy, but I knew that maintaining those relationships would only continue to hurt me. Sometimes, letting go is the only way to truly heal. In the days that followed, I focused on my work and personal life. I moved into a smaller but cozy apartment that was entirely my own. This space brought me the peace I had been searching for. Every morning I brewed a cup of coffee, sat by the window overlooking the city, and reminded myself of how far I had come. Overcoming the pain and challenges of my past. Through persistence, I in fact returned myself to okay. In moments of quiet reflection, I often thought about Grandpa Harold and Grandma Margaret. Their guidance and unconditional love continued to be the compass for my decisions. I made a promise to myself that if I ever had children, I would love them equally and unconditionally. They would never feel compared or abandoned as I once did. I wanted to create a family where every member felt valued and cherished. One day, while walking through a nearby park, I saw a mother playing with her two young children. The sight made me smile and brought back fond memories of my time with my grandparents. In that moment, I realized I didn't need a perfect family to become a good parent. What mattered was that I had learned from the mistakes of others, and knew how to give love. As time passed, I gradually built a new life, one that was fuller and more meaningful. My financial consulting business flourished, and I dedicated part of my income to supporting organizations that helped children and struggling families. I believed that the best way to honor my grandparents was to help others who needed a little kindness and support to overcome their hardships. Although I no longer spoke with my parents and Laura, I didn't feel lonely. I surrounded myself with new relationships, friends and colleagues who genuinely valued and supported me. I also learned how to forgive, not to reconcile with those who had hurt me, but to free myself from the burden of pain and anger. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, it meant accepting that the past couldn't be changed, but the future could. One morning while journaling, I wrote down a promise to myself. I will become the person I once wished I had in my life. That promise became a driving force, motivating me to continue striving, not only in my career, but also in building a future I could be proud of. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but I knew I was ready for it. I had learned how to love myself, to heal from the wounds of the past, and to build a life founded on love, fairness, and hope. And one day, when I have children, they will not endure the pain I once did. They will grow up surrounded by love, support, and the unwavering belief that they are always worthy. Because that is how I will love them. Just as Harold and Margaret loved me. The takeaway from this story is the importance of love, fairness, and independence. Family wounds can leave deep scars, but they do not define who we are. The sacrifices and unconditional love from the grandparents teach us that true family isn't always about blood relations, it's about the people who love and value us. More importantly, learning to stand on our own, build our lives, and love ourselves is the key to overcoming pain and creating a brighter future. What are your thoughts on this story? What lessons did you take away from it? Don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss more heartwarming and meaningful stories about family and life. The upcoming stories will make you reflect and inspire you. If someone looked at my life from the outside, they would think I was lucky. I grew up in a luxurious mansion with soaring ceilings, expensive furniture, and family dinners set with silver cutlery. Everything around me exuded wealth. Lavish vacations, custom-designed dresses, and extravagant gifts that my friends could only dream of. But there was one thing no one knew: the price I had to pay for this life. My name is Nora Whitmore, daughter of Jonathan Whitmore, owner of Whitmore Pharmaceuticals, the largest pharmacy chain on the East Coast of the United States. This company was not only my family's immense source of wealth, but also my father's pride, a man who saw business as his very reason for living. He was not the kind of affectionate father often seen in family movies. When he walked into the house after a long workday, his first words were, "Never, 'How was your day?' but rather, 'What were today's sales numbers?'" I grew up surrounded by numbers, financial reports, and conversations about profit margins. In my father's eyes, that was how an heir should be raised. He constantly emphasized that the future of the company rested in my hands, and that I needed to be ready to take over one day. My mother, Eleanor Whitmore, was a refined woman who always appeared adorned with dazzling jewelry and flawless dresses without a single wrinkle. If my father set the rules, my mother ensured that everything maintained a perfect appearance. She didn't care about sales figures or business strategies. What mattered to her was the family's reputation. To my mother, being a Whitmore meant upholding the image of an impeccable, high-society family where everything had to be luxurious, from the table settings to how her children behaved in front of others. I had an older brother, Ethan Whitmore, 3 years my senior. If I was my father's prized gem, Ethan was his greatest disappointment. He had no interest in the pharmacy business, no passion for sales or the pharmaceutical market. Instead, he was captivated by history and archaeology, immersing himself in books about ancient civilizations and spending hours researching historical relics. I vividly remember the dinner when I was 14, the night Ethan declared that he would pursue archaeology instead of business. "What did you just say?" My father slammed his fork down, his eyes burning with anger. "I want to study history, Dad," Ethan said, his voice calm but resolute. "History? You plan to dig up ancient rocks instead of running the family company?" My father let out a short, dry laugh. But it wasn't a pleasant one. My mother remained silent, but I could see her stiffen, as if moving even slightly would shatter the fragile tension in the air. Ethan said nothing more and simply lowered his head to continue eating. But at that moment, I knew he had been permanently removed from my father's list of choices. From that day forward, my father placed all his expectations on me. I was no longer the second option, I would be the sole heir. As I grew older, I did everything to become the perfect daughter in my father's eyes. I attended meetings, learned how to read financial reports, and started interning at the company when I was just 16. I remember the times my father took me to the office, teaching me how to negotiate with suppliers and evaluate contracts. He would nod in approval whenever I grasped things quickly, but if I made a mistake, his gaze would turn cold, making me feel like I had deeply disappointed him. At some point, I stopped questioning the path I was on. I believed I was born to inherit Whitmore Pharmaceuticals. I believed it was what I wanted. At least, I thought so. Until I met him. Asher Hale. I enrolled at Preston Business School, one of the most prestigious institutions in the country. It wasn't just a place that trained future business leaders, it was a gathering ground for heirs of top corporations. I felt completely at home in this environment, with finance lectures, extravagant networking events, and platinum credit cards swiped without a second thought. But the meeting that changed my life didn't happen at an economics seminar or a lavish cocktail party. It happened in the lecture hall. That day, I was struggling with a market analysis and data systems assignment, a subject I had no interest in. I sat in front of my laptop, frustrated by numbers that refused to cooperate. Need some help? I looked up and saw a guy standing in front of me, Asher Hale. I had heard of him before. He wasn't one of the spoiled rich boys I was used to at Preston. Asher was a computer science student, known for his sharp intelligence and genius programming skills. Asher wasn't born into wealth. His family were immigrants. His father was a mechanic and his mother worked as a diner waitress. He didn't have the privileges I had always taken for granted. He was here on a full scholarship, solely because of his talent. I usually hated asking for help, but something about his calm voice made me nod. Asher pulled up a chair beside me, scanning the lines of code I had been struggling with for hours. "You're actually pretty good," he noted, his fingers moving effortlessly over the keyboard. "Your approach is just a bit convoluted. Let me clean it up." 10 minutes later, my assignment was running smoothly. "You're really good." "Thank you. As a token of appreciation, let me buy you a coffee," I said, half joking. Asher smiled, his eyes lighting up. "Looks like today is my lucky day. I love coffee." I never imagined that a programming assignment would mark the beginning of something much bigger. We started spending more time together, at first in study groups, then in coffee shops, where our conversations stretched late into the night. Asher was different from the men I had known. He wasn't from my world, the world of elite dinners, expensive suits, and conversations that revolved solely around stocks and real estate. He was more grounded, more thoughtful, and far simpler. "I never want to be rich just for the sake of showing off," he once told me as we sat together on the grassy lawn of our campus. "I want to create something meaningful, something that can truly change people's lives." I didn't know when it happened, but I began to admire him. Not for his money or status, but for the way he saw the world, a world I had never paid attention to before. And then, I realized I loved him. We had been together for nearly a year when Asher proposed. It wasn't with a giant diamond ring or a grand proposal in an upscale restaurant. He took me for a walk along the cobblestone path near campus, where the streetlights cast a soft golden glow. "Nora," he said, his voice warm and steady, "I know I'm not the person your family wants for you. I know I don't have vast wealth or powerful connections." I squeezed his hand, stopping him before he could say more. "You are everything I want, Asher." He smiled, his brown eyes filled with sincerity. Then, he pulled out a simple silver ring. No sparkling diamonds, no elaborate design. "I can't promise you a luxurious life right now," he said, "but I promise I'll do everything to give us the best life possible. And I promise to always love you." I didn't hesitate. "I do." I thought that if I was happy, my family would accept it. But I was wrong. When I told my parents about the wedding, I saw the shock on their faces, quickly followed by contempt. "Are you joking, Nora?" My mother blinked repeatedly, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. My father narrowed his eyes, his voice cold as ice. "That guy wants our money, doesn't he? Or a piece of the company? Or is he just trying to gold dig you?" I was so heartbroken, I couldn't even speak. My father, the man who had always preached business ethics, now saw Asher as nothing more than an opportunist. Just because he wasn't wealthy. That was when I realized, to them, love didn't matter, only money and status did. And I knew this was just the beginning of the most important battle of my life. I knew my parents wouldn't accept Asher easily, but I never expected the dinner introduction to turn into an absolute nightmare. My mother was the one who suggested the dinner. "We need to meet him before making any decisions, Nora," she said, her voice sweet, but carrying something hidden beneath. My father said nothing, but his expression made it clear that he saw this as a personal insult. In his world, people like Asher were not accepted. Or rather, they had no place in the Whitmore family. I had convinced Asher that this was an opportunity for my family to get to know him better, but deep down, I had a bad feeling about it. That evening, Asher and I walked into the grand dining room of the Whitmore estate, where family dinners were always formal, complete with expensive wine glasses and glittering chandeliers. But instead of a warm welcome, we were met with scrutinizing glances and forced smiles. "Good evening, it's a pleasure to meet you all," Asher said, his voice calm, though I could feel the tension in every word he spoke. My mother set down her wineglass, her gaze sweeping over Asher's simple suit before she raised an eyebrow. My father didn't bother hiding his displeasure. He merely nodded slightly, not even offering a proper greeting. No one invited him to sit, as if they were testing his patience. The heavy silence lingered until we finally sat down at the table. Dinner began, but no one was truly focused on the food. Every gaze was fixed on Asher, as if he were an item being appraised. "Asher, what do you do for a living?" my father asked, his voice calm yet laced with scrutiny. "I'm a software engineer," Asher replied, maintaining his composure. "I'm developing an AI platform to help businesses manage data more efficiently." My father smirked. "AI, huh? One of those trendy new tech fads? Interesting. And how much do you make from this little project of yours?" I clenched my hands under the table. I knew this wasn't a casual question. In my father's world, a man's worth was measured by the balance in his bank account. Asher didn't waver. "I have some investors interested, but more importantly, I believe in the long-term potential of this product." My father let out a short, derisive laugh. "Sounds familiar. Do you have any idea how many young men just like you talk about long-term vision and end up living in a cramped apartment, eating instant noodles?" I set my knife down on my plate with a sharp clang, breaking the tense silence. "Father, Asher is not some naive dreamer," I said, my voice tight with frustration. My mother blinked and delicately placed her napkin on the table, as if preparing to deliver a lesson in reason. "Nora, you have to understand. You grew up in an environment where money was never a concern. We have a certain standard of living, and we only want you to maintain it." I let out a dry chuckle. "You mean I should marry someone rich?" My mother didn't deny it. The tension in the room thickened. But the breaking point came with my father's next words. "Let's be honest, Nora," he said, setting his utensils down and looking straight at Asher. "He's just using you for an opportunity to get his hands on your money. Don't think I don't see it. Men like him always have the same story. Poor, hard-working, ambitious, but in the end, all they really want is a shortcut to wealth." I heard a quiet, saddened sigh from Asher, but he didn't react immediately. He simply met my father's gaze, unwavering. "You can believe whatever you want," Asher said, his voice calm but sharp. "But I have never and will never rely on someone else's money to succeed." My father tilted his head slightly, his lips curling into a dismissive smile. "Oh? Is that so? Do you really think you can give my daughter the life she deserves?" I couldn't take it anymore. "Enough," I shouted, standing up abruptly. The room fell silent. "You taught me about the value of hard work, about building success with your own hands," I said, staring at my father, my eyes burning with anger. "And now, here you are, belittling a man who is doing exactly that, just because he wasn't born into wealth?" My father stood up as well, his gaze filled with fury. "If you walk out of here with him, don't bother coming back, Nora." I felt my entire body tremble. I took a deep breath, then turned to Asher, gripping his hand tightly. "I guess that means I'm no longer your daughter?" And with the heat of emotions surging inside me, I walked out of that house. Out of my family. As I reached the door, I paused for a moment, waiting. Hoping for some last words from my parents. Something, anything, that might indicate they would reconsider. But no one even looked at me. I made my choice. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. I didn't know what it truly meant to be cut off from family until it actually happened. That day, when the doors of the Whitmore estate slammed shut behind me, I thought it was just a wooden door, a lifeless object. But in reality, it was the final barrier between me and the world I had once belonged to. No more luxurious dinners at the grand dining table. No more harsh critiques softened by parental protection. No more extravagant vacations or expensive cars, where I never had to worry about the cost. I didn't just lose my family, I lost the security of the life I had known for 23 years. But I had no regrets. Asher and I left without a concrete plan. He took me to his small apartment, a modest but warm place. There were no crystal chandeliers, no plush velvet chairs, but there was love and peace. The first days were not easy. I was used to having everything at my fingertips, but now, I had to learn how to live like an ordinary person. My credit cards were canceled the very next day, my personal bank accounts frozen. I was left with exactly $5,000 in a savings account I had opened in high school. A sum of money I had never thought I would actually need. But Asher didn't let me dwell on negativity for too long. "We're going to be okay, Nora," he said, squeezing my hand. "We don't need anything but ourselves to build this life." He believed it. And slowly, I did too. Asher worked relentlessly. He had told my father he was developing an AI platform, but my father didn't believe him. He thought it was nothing more than a foolish dream. But I knew, Asher had a clear vision. During the day, he worked as a programmer for a mid-size software company. At night, he buried himself in his computer screen, writing line after line of code to build the platform he believed would revolutionize data management for businesses. We ate more instant noodles than I could count, but each day, I saw the fire in Asher's eyes burn brighter. "I don't need anyone's validation," he told me one night as we sat on our tiny balcony, looking out over the city. "I just need to believe in this myself." And I believed too. I was no longer a Whitmore heiress, but I still had a business mind. I realized that the skills I had learned while working at Whitmore Pharmaceuticals were not useless. I could read financial reports faster than anyone, analyze markets, and build business strategies. I started taking on small consulting jobs for startups. I had no reputation, but I had knowledge and sharp instincts. Gradually, I built a name for myself. One company referred me to another, then another. I no longer worried about rent, and soon, I was able to save. 1 year after leaving my family, I officially launched my own business consulting firm. No backing from my parents, not a single dollar from the Whitmore empire. Just me, with my own abilities. There was one person who didn't turn his back on me. A year after I left home, I received an email from Ethan. "Nora, are you okay? I heard what happened from a distance. Mom and Dad don't mention you, but I know you well enough to understand that you would never walk away unless you truly believed in your decision. If you need anything, just say the word. I support you." I couldn't stop my tears from falling. Ethan had never been the son our parents loved. They saw him as a failure, but he was the only one who had ever truly understood me. "I'm okay, Ethan," I texted back. "Thank you." We stayed in touch. He was the one family member who believed in me. 3 years after I walked away with nothing, I stood in front of the towering headquarters of Tech, the tech company Asher had built. It was no longer just an idea, it was an empire. Asher had turned his AI platform into a groundbreaking product. Tech now had hundreds of employees, major contracts with top corporations, and a loyal customer base. And I was no longer a girl living in my father's shadow. My consulting firm had become a well-respected name in the industry. I helped startups find their path, helped them grow, just as I had done for myself. We did it. Without my family, without their money. Just us. And I had never believed I could. 3 years after I walked away with nothing, I was no longer the weak Nora Whitmore, living under my family's control. Asher and I had built everything from nothing. Tech, Asher's company, had become one of the leading names in AI for businesses. major corporations scrambled to sign contracts, and the media praised him as the genius mind behind the data revolution. His personal net worth surpassed $500 million just 2 years after the company was valued on the market. That was Hailtech. As for me, I was no longer the girl living in my father's shadow. Whitmore Consulting had grown into a top-tier consulting firm for startups, helping them optimize their growth strategies. I had my own team, working with clients ranging from small startups to large companies looking to restructure. We had done it without a single dollar from my family. And then, the day came when I would have to face them again. I hadn't heard a word from my parents in 3 years. Ethan messaged me from time to time, saying that our parents never mentioned me, as if I had never existed. But then, an unexpected invitation arrived. The Whitmore family cordially invites Ms. Nora Whitmore and Mr. Asher Hale to the 60th birthday celebration of Mr. Jonathan Whitmore. I laughed as I looked at the glossy cream-colored invitation. My father, the man who disowned me, was now inviting me to his birthday party? Asher sat beside me, quietly observing. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I turned the invitation over in my hands, running my fingers over the gold-embossed lettering. "We're going," I said, smiling. "I want to see what they really need to see in us." The Whitmore estate no longer shone as brightly as the day I left. The once meticulously maintained gardens now showed signs of neglect. I realized that things were no longer the same. The party was much smaller than the extravagant events I had once attended. As we stepped inside, all eyes immediately turned to Asher. "Oh my God, that's Asher Hale," someone whispered. "The CEO of Hailtech. I just read his interview in Forbes." The same people who once looked down on Asher were now scrambling to speak with him. They no longer saw him as an outsider, but as a gateway to wealth and opportunity. And then, I saw my parents. My mother approached me with the same forced smile I had once known so well. "Nora, darling, you're finally home," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. I didn't respond. I just looked at her, waiting to see what she would say next. My father, the man who had thrown me out 3 years ago, now walked toward me, attempting to appear friendly. "My daughter, you've changed so much," he said. "I'm very proud of what you've accomplished." I let out a soft laugh. "Oh really? You're proud of a daughter you disowned?" The air around the table went still. My father cleared his throat, trying to regain the authoritative presence he once commanded. "There's no need to dwell on the past, Nora. Family is family. And actually, your mother and I have something we need to discuss with you and Asher." I glanced at Asher before following them into a private sitting room. As soon as we sat down, my father wasted no time. "Today is my birthday. I wanted to see you after all this time, and I want to apologize. I hope you can forgive me," he said. "That aside, now that you're successful, our family is facing some financial difficulties, and we were hoping you could help." I wasn't surprised. As it turned out, after I left, my father had handed over the management of Whitmore Pharmaceuticals to a distant relative, Lucas Whitmore. Lucas had made disastrous financial decisions, leading to multiple lawsuits and a loss of customer trust. Now, the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. "The banks have refused to extend our loans," my father said, his voice strained as he tried to remain composed. "Without a new investment, Whitmore Pharmaceuticals will collapse." My mother chimed in, her tone saccharine to the point of nausea. "Nora, we may have had our differences, but you're still a part of the Whitmore family. And Asher, you're a smart businessman. If you invest in the family company, it can rise again." I glanced at Asher, who remained silent, observing. I knew he was always willing to help those in need, but this wasn't one of those times. I crossed my legs, leaned back in my chair, and smiled. "So, what you really want is for Asher to pour money into the company?" My mother forced a tight smile. "It's not just about money. It's about family helping each other." I looked directly at my parents, unwavering. "Family? You're right, families should help each other. But 3 years ago, you made it very clear that I was no longer part of the Whitmore family." My father's face paled while my mother struggled to maintain her smile. Nora, don't be like this. I stood up, pulling Asher up with me. No, Mother. I've learned my lesson. Blood doesn't make a family. I turned and walked toward the door, not looking back once. And this time, I knew I would never return. I walked out of my father's birthday party without looking back. This time, I was certain I would never go back again. My parents had always believed I would forever need them, that I couldn't survive without the Whitmore family. But the truth was, I had built a life far greater than they ever imagined, a life free from the weight of legacy and inherited wealth. And while I rose, they fell. Just 6 months after that birthday party, Whitmore Pharmaceuticals officially declared bankruptcy. I didn't find out through a message from my parents, they never contacted me again after that night, but through financial news headlines. Whitmore Pharmaceuticals faces massive lawsuit, assets frozen. Once a pharmaceutical giant, the company files for bankruptcy. The Whitmore family, forced to sell estate, moves into modest apartment after financial collapse. Headline after headline, but I felt no satisfaction. I had warned them, but they never listened. Lucas Whitmore, the distant relative my father had trusted to run the company, had signed multiple deals with low-quality suppliers, leading to a flood of lawsuits from customers. By the time the government launched an investigation, it was too late. Whitmore Pharmaceuticals collapsed in the exact way my father used to mock other failing companies. And in the end, my parents were left with nothing. The Whitmore estate, the home I once thought I would live in forever, was auctioned off to pay debts. The luxury cars, the priceless art collection, even the jewelry my mother once flaunted at high society events, all disappeared, one by one. They moved into a small apartment in a far less glamorous neighborhood, surviving on what little savings remained after clearing their debts. Once at the top, they had become forgotten names in the business world. Ethan was the only one who kept in touch with me. He never expressed satisfaction over our parents' downfall. If anything, he just sighed when talking about them. I thought they would reach out to you, he said during one call. They won't, I replied with a small smile. They'll never admit they were wrong. And just as I expected, my parents never called, never apologized, never acknowledged the pain they had caused me. They had once valued reputation above all else, and now they would rather endure hardship than admit that their daughter had succeeded without them. Perhaps, in their hearts, I was still the traitor who abandoned the family. But I didn't care anymore. One evening, I sat on the rooftop of the Hailtech building, looking down at the city, glowing with lights. Asher stepped outside, taking a seat beside me, handing me a glass of wine. What are you thinking about? He asked. I took a deep breath, letting the cool night air wash over me. I'm thinking if someone had told me 3 years ago that we'd be here, I wouldn't have believed them. Asher smiled, his eyes filled with love as he looked at me. But you did it. I looked at him, the man who had stood by my side, even when we lived in a tiny apartment, even when we had days where all we could afford was instant noodles. He never turned his back on me, even when my family did. And I knew, in that moment, that I was the richest person in the world. Not because of money, though Asher and I now had more than we ever dreamed of. Not because of fame, though our names had appeared on the front pages of top business magazines. But because I had a husband who loved me unconditionally, a brother who always supported me, and a life I had built with my own hands, free from my parents' control. One day, I received a message from an unknown number. Nora, your father is sick. He won't say it, but I know he wants to see you. I read the message in silence. 3 years ago I might have rushed back, hoping for an apology, for some belated acceptance. But I was different now. I was no longer the weak girl who craved my family's approval. I had built a life of my own, one I was proud of. And yet, my heart wasn't entirely cold. I turned to Asher, the man who had been by my side through the hardest of times. What do you think? I asked softly. Asher gently squeezed my hand. I'll support whatever decision you make, Nora. But I know there's something still lingering in your heart. I sighed. Some doors could be closed, but not all of them had to be locked forever. I decided to see them. When I stepped into the small apartment where my parents now lived, an unfamiliar feeling washed over me. The people who once lived in luxury, who once valued reputation above family, now sat before me with a humility I had never seen in them before. My father looked at me, and the pride and authority that had once been in his eyes were gone. Only regret remained. "Nora?" His voice was weak, but it was enough to bring back old memories. I didn't know what to say. The wounds were still there, but as I looked at the frail man in front of me, I no longer felt anger. I felt acceptance. "How are you feeling, Dad?" I asked, my voice not as cold as I once imagined it would be. He stared at me for a long moment, then gave a small smile, a real one, not one of arrogance or pretense. "I made mistakes," he said, his voice rough and weary. "I know I can't change the past, but I just want you to know I'm proud of you." I couldn't stop my tears from falling. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was the closest thing my father could offer from the depths of his heart. My mother reached for my hand, and for the first time, she was no longer the poised, high society woman she once was. "I'm sorry, Nora," she whispered. "I let money and status blind me. I only hope you can forgive me." I gave her hand a gentle squeeze, a silent response. I knew things would never go back to the way they were, but maybe in some way we could start over. Not perfectly, but in our own way. The story of Nora Whitmore is not just about breaking free from family control. It is a lesson on the true meaning of success and happiness. In society, many people are bound by family expectations, by the weight of reputation and inherited wealth. But the truth is, success only matters when you build it yourself. Nora lost her old family, but she found her real one. Those who loved her unconditionally. Her story is a reminder that our worth is not determined by where we come from, but by what we create with our own hands. What do you think about Nora Whitmore's story? Do you agree with her choices? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories about life, family, and valuable lessons. I never thought I'd become the main character in a story filled with such bitter betrayal. But if someone were to ask me whether I had any gut feeling beforehand, I'd say yes. Though I tried my best to ignore it at the time. It all began quietly, like a tiny crack on a perfectly clear glass. I didn't notice it until it spread into a large fracture, and eventually everything shattered right before my eyes. People often say that family is the safest place. But if your own blood is the one who betrays you, then who can you really trust? My name is Catherine, I'm 30 years old, and this is the story of how I lost the two people I once trusted the most. My sister Emily, and my boyfriend Ryan. Emily, 27, is my only sister. We grew up together but were never really close. I wasn't the gentle, nurturing type of older sister, and Emily always loved being pampered. Ever since we were kids, she was used to being the center of attention, especially from our parents. I don't blame Emily for that. It's partly her personality but also because our parents were clearly biased. I did well in school, worked hard, never asked for anything. And maybe that's why they thought I didn't need as much attention as Emily did. Ryan, 32, was my boyfriend. We'd been together for 3 years, and while our relationship wasn't perfect, I still believed we had a future. He was charming, with an easy smile that made people like him instantly. But he wasn't exactly romantic or emotionally intuitive. That never really bothered me. Until I started noticing small, suspicious signs between him and Emily. Back then, I thought I was just overthinking things. Emily was about to marry Daniel, a wealthy and handsome man. They'd been engaged for nearly a year and my whole family was excited for the wedding. Especially Emily, this was the moment she'd dreamed of her whole life. I wasn't particularly close to Daniel, but from the times we met, it was clear he truly loved Emily. What I didn't expect was that Emily wasn't as fully invested in the wedding as she pretended to be. It all started when I noticed Emily being a little too friendly with Ryan. Nothing obvious at first, just harmless-sounding compliments like, Wow, Ryan, you're so funny. How does Catherine even manage to keep someone like you? You're so lucky, Catherine. If I'd met him first, who knows how things might have turned out. I laughed it off, thinking Emily was just joking. But then I started noticing other things. Whenever we were in the same room, Emily always found a way to get physically closer to Ryan than necessary. She laughed loudly at all his jokes, even the ones that weren't funny. Her hand would brush against his shoulder during conversations, and sometimes she'd nudge him playfully when teasing. One night we were having dinner with the family, and I caught a look from Emily. A glance that lingered too long, more intense than usual, and held something I couldn't quite name. A kind of attention that a sister should never direct toward her sister's boyfriend. I tried to brush it off, but the discomfort lingered. It felt like a tiny thorn under my skin. Not painful enough to scream, but just enough to keep me on edge. After that dinner, when we got home, I turned to Ryan and asked him directly, "Did you notice Emily acting a little weird?" Ryan frowned. "Weird? What are you talking about?" "She laughs at everything you say, touches you constantly, and the way she looks at you, it's just a little too much." He chuckled. "You're imagining things. She's just excited about the wedding, that's all. Nothing's going on." Maybe I really was just overthinking. Maybe I was being too sensitive? But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping out of my control. What I didn't know was that the truth would be far worse than anything I could have imagined. I kept trying to convince myself I was just being paranoid, that all I saw was simply Emily's overexcitement for her upcoming wedding. But something inside me refused to settle. And just like a drop of ink spreading on a white page, my doubts became harder to ignore. Emily's behavior around Ryan was no longer subtle. Things started becoming disturbingly obvious. One evening, we were at our parents' house to discuss wedding plans. I was sitting across from Ryan, listening to my mom talk about the reception menu, when I suddenly noticed Emily sitting far too close to him. And not just that, her hand was resting on Ryan's thigh, her fingers lightly tracing circles, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I held my breath. Ryan didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he was pretending not to. I waited for some kind of reaction, a slight movement, a gesture to remove her hand. But nothing. Ryan just sat there, letting my sister's hand stay on his leg. A wave of anger surged in my chest, but I held it back. Not now. Not in front of my parents. But as we were getting ready to leave, Emily shot me a provocative look, her lips curling into a sly smile, like she knew I had seen everything. In the days that followed, I tried to be more cautious. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I might have been exaggerating, just like Ryan said, but the more I watched, the more I felt something inside me starting to crack. One night, we attended a small party Daniel hosted at a bar to celebrate the upcoming wedding. I stood next to Ryan, hand in hand, trying to enjoy the evening without letting my uneasy thoughts take over. Then Emily showed up, walking toward us in a tight red dress. She looked suspiciously stunning and clearly knew it. I noticed Ryan swallow hard, his eyes flickering briefly before he quickly looked away. "Wow, Ryan," Emily laughed loudly, giving him a playful tap on the shoulder like this was the highlight of her night. "You look more handsome than usual." I tightened my grip on Ryan's hand. He chuckled lightly, but didn't respond. "What are you drinking tonight?" Emily tilted her head, her eyes sparkling mischievously. "Or, should I order something for you? I know a cocktail that would suit you perfectly." "No need, Catherine will order for me," Ryan said, his voice a little uneasy. But instead of stepping back, Emily leaned in even closer, so close I could smell her perfume. "Oh, really? Then I'll get drinks for both of you. Consider it a toast to my wedding." Then, right in front of me, she placed her hand on Ryan's chest, pretending to brush off some invisible speck of dust. My entire body tensed. I wanted to scream, to yank her hand off Ryan. But before I could react, Ryan stepped back, raising his hand to rub the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable. "Emily," I said through clenched teeth, my voice low, "what are you doing?" Emily blinked innocently. Oh, relax, sis, I'm just playing around. Playing? I sneered. You call touching my boyfriend playing? Ryan placed his hand on mine, his voice dropping. Catherine, you're overreacting. Emily was just joking. I turned to him, the frustration in my chest ready to explode. Joking? So you think it's completely fine for my sister to put her hands on you right in front of me? Ryan sighed, his tone a little annoyed. You're making this a bigger deal than it is, Catherine. I'm not interested in Emily. And I'm sure she doesn't mean anything by it. You're just being too sensitive. Too sensitive? A cold shiver ran down my spine. Emily stood there, arms crossed, staring at me defiantly, like she knew I couldn't do a thing. I clenched my fists, anger and hurt tightening around my throat. I wasn't imagining things. Everything was happening right in front of me. But Ryan, the one who should have been on my side, was telling me to calm down. I felt like I was standing alone on a tightrope, teetering between reality and doubt. But part of me had started to understand. The truth was right in front of me, I just needed to find a way to prove it. And I wasn't going to let anyone make me doubt myself again. I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. If I kept letting things slide, Emily would keep pushing the boundaries, and I'd keep being pushed to the sidelines in my own relationship. I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to confront her. The next day I called Emily, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible. Are you free? I want to see you. Emily hesitated for a moment, then agreed. Sure. Where do you want to meet? The cafe near your place. I'll be there in 30 minutes. When I arrived, Emily was already seated at a window table, holding a latte in her hand. She looked completely relaxed, carefree, as if nothing had happened. That only made the anger inside me rise even faster. I sat down across from her, skipping any polite small talk. We need to talk. Emily raised an eyebrow, giving me a mocking smile. About what, dear sister? I clenched my jaw, feeling the blood in my veins start to boil. You know exactly what this is about. Emily set her coffee down, crossing her arms. If you're here to talk about your awful attitude these past few days, then I don't think there's anything to say. I looked her straight in the eyes, not backing down. You're flirting with Ryan. Emily let out a sharp, mocking laugh. What? Are you serious right now? Dead serious. I stood my ground. You think I haven't noticed? The unnecessary touches, the overly sweet smiles, and the way you look at him like... Like what? Emily cut me off, her gaze suddenly cold. I tightened my fists under the table. Like you want something that doesn't belong to you. Emily raised an eyebrow, then burst out laughing, louder than before. Oh my God, are you jealous of me, Catherine? Is this the first time you've felt like you're not good enough? Her words cut through me like a blade. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. This isn't about jealousy. It's about respect. You're getting married, Emily. Your fiancé is Daniel, not Ryan. So why are you doing this? Emily leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs and folding her arms, her face completely unapologetic. Do you seriously think I'm trying to steal Ryan? You're pathetic, Catherine. Do you really not trust your own relationship that much? The anger rose to my throat. I slammed my hand on the table, causing a few people in the cafe to turn and look. Don't dodge the question. You know exactly what you're doing. Don't pretend to be innocent. Emily shook her head, the smile on her face fading. You're always like this, always thinking the world is out to get you. It's exhausting. I glared at her, my voice dropping. Emily, I'm warning you, stop before it's too late. Emily shot to her feet, pushing her chair back with a sharp screech. You're insane, Catherine. If you want to keep living in your delusions, go ahead, but leave me out of it. I stood too, staring straight into her eyes. You pulled yourself into this, Emily. I'm just trying to remind you. Emily tossed her hair over her shoulder, her eyes like ice. You don't have the right to remind me of anything. You're just bitter because I have everything, and you don't. I clenched my fists but tried to stay calm. So Ryan's part of that everything too, huh? Emily pressed her lips together, and for a second, something flickered in her eyes. Anger? Guilt? But just as quickly she gave a cold smile. You've really lost it. You think Ryan would leave you for me? If you're that insecure, maybe you should take a good look at your relationship. I went silent. Emily slung her purse over her shoulder, her eyes now completely emotionless. If you can't even trust your own boyfriend, that's your problem, not mine. And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there in a storm of tangled emotions. I watched her walk off, feeling like something between us had just completely collapsed. From that moment on, I knew Emily and I had crossed a line we could never return from. I knew this wouldn't be the end of it. Emily had never backed down from an argument, especially not when she felt threatened. And just as I expected, less than a day later, I got a call from Mom. Her voice was nothing like its usual gentle tone. "Catherine, do you even know what you've done?" she nearly shouted the moment I picked up. I sighed, gripping the phone tighter. "Mom, I don't know what Emily told you, but I can assure you—" "Don't lie to me," she snapped, her voice full of fury. "Emily called me last night sobbing. You insulted her, accused her of horrible things right before her wedding. How could you be so selfish, Catherine?" I closed my eyes, feeling a sharp pain in my chest. "Mom, I only told Emily she should keep her distance from Ryan. Can't you see there's something off about the way she acts around him?" "Off?" My mother's voice was ice cold. "Emily is just being friendly. She loves Daniel. She has no reason to do the things you're imagining. You're the one destroying everything." I let out a bitter laugh. "Friendly? So putting her hands on my boyfriend is friendly now? Laughing way too hard at his boring jokes is just friendliness too?" "Exactly," my mom practically screamed. "Have you lost your mind, Catherine? You're jealous of your sister, right before her big day." I was stunned. Jealous? Is that really what they thought of me? "Mom, this isn't about jealousy." I tried to keep my voice calm. "This is about Emily crossing the line. And I'm just trying to protect my relationship." But my mother didn't listen. She never really had. "You've always been like this, Catherine, always trying to ruin other people's happiness. Ever since you were a child, you've kept your distance, never trying to fit in with this family. And now, when your sister finally has a perfect life, you're trying to drag her down." I felt a lump in my throat. "Mom, please." "No, I don't want to hear another word. If you can't act like a real sister, don't expect this family to stand by your side." I heard a sharp click as the call ended. I stared at the phone screen, my heart pounding. They didn't believe me. They never intended to believe me. I tried to calm myself, but the feeling of betrayal clung to me the rest of the day. When Ryan came home, I knew I had to talk to him. "Ryan," I began, my voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Can you sit down? I need to talk to you." He frowned but sat down. "What's going on?" I swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. "I spoke to Emily. I told her to stop. That I wasn't comfortable with the way she acts around you." Ryan sighed, rubbing his forehead. "This again, Catherine?" A wave of anger surged inside me. "This again? Do you really not see anything wrong?" He looked at me, visibly annoyed. "You're doing this to yourself, Catherine. I already told you. Emily doesn't mean anything by it. This is all in your head." I let out a bitter laugh. "So you're taking her side too?" Ryan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "I just think you're overreacting. You're letting negative thoughts control you. Instead of trusting me, you're choosing to be suspicious and making a problem out of nothing." "Nothing?" I repeated, my voice trembling with anger. "That's right," he nodded, completely unfazed. "Catherine, if you keep this up, you're going to push everyone away. Not just Emily, but your parents too. Maybe even me." I froze. His words echoed in my head like a sentence. Was I the one at fault? Was I the one ruining everything? A painful ache spread through my body. Not just my family, Even the man I loved wasn't on my side. I clenched my hands on my lap, my nails nearly digging into my skin. Ryan sighed again, his tone softening. I just want you to calm down. Don't let these thoughts hurt you. I love you, but I can't keep proving to you over and over that nothing's happening. I looked at him, looked long and hard. Part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to believe I was just overthinking. But deep down, I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew something was going on. The problem was, I had no one on my side. I had prepared myself for a lot. I'd come to terms with the fact that my family wouldn't believe me, that Ryan would keep defending Emily. But I never thought I'd have to witness my own nightmare unfold. A week before Emily's wedding, my parents hosted a small party at their house to celebrate. I didn't want to go, but after multiple calls from my mom pressuring me, I decided to show up. Not because I wanted to make peace, but because I didn't want to give them another reason to call me selfish. The house was glowing with lights, laughter echoing through the backyard, and everyone was full of excitement. I tried to blend in, to keep my composure, even though Emily kept shooting me challenging looks whenever our eyes met. I needed some air. I quietly slipped into the house, walking down the hallway toward the front yard where it was quieter, but as I turned the corner, I stopped in my tracks. What I saw froze me on the spot. Under the dim garden lights, right next to the vine-covered fence, Ryan and Emily were kissing. It wasn't a fleeting kiss. It wasn't a misunderstanding. They were wrapped around each other like nothing else in the world mattered in that moment. Ryan's arms were around Emily's waist, and she had hers locked around his neck. Their bodies pressed tightly together. Time stopped. I couldn't breathe. My head spun so hard I wasn't sure if I could even stay standing. A deep, searing ache spread through my chest. Like someone had just taken a knife to the last remaining pieces of trust I had. Then I screamed. A raw, broken sound that shattered the stillness around us. What the hell is this? Ryan jolted, whipping around to face me, his face pale as a ghost. Emily froze, her eyes wide like she'd just been caught stealing in broad daylight. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. No one said anything for a few seconds. The only sounds were my ragged breathing and the wind rustling through the leaves. Then Ryan began to stammer. Catherine, I can explain. I let out a bitter laugh, my voice catching. Explain? What are you going to say? That I imagined it? That I'm overreacting again? Emily stepped forward, her voice shaky. Catherine, it's not what you think. I stared at my sister, hatred boiling inside me. Not what I think? I threw my hand toward them. I just saw it with my own eyes. How long has this been going on? Or is this just the first time I happened to be here to see it? Ryan reached out as if to touch me, but I stepped back. Don't touch me. My voice dripped with disgust, eyes burning with tears I refused to let fall. Both of you betrayed me. Emily, you're my sister. And you, Ryan? You stood there defending her, telling me I was imagining things. Emily began to cry, her voice trembling. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to what? I snapped, laughing bitterly. Didn't mean to kiss my boyfriend? Or didn't mean for me to catch you? Ryan opened his mouth, but I didn't want to hear it anymore. Save it. I clenched my fists, my voice so cold I barely recognized it. I'd been so stupid, believing your lies, convincing myself I was just being paranoid. But no, I was right all along. I took a step back and turned away. Wait, Catherine! Ryan called after me. But I didn't stop. Emily sobbed behind me, but I didn't care. I couldn't stay there for another second. My footsteps echoed on the gravel path toward the driveway. I nearly ran to my car, my hands trembling as I unlocked the door. I couldn't believe everything I had. My family, my boyfriend, my sister, had all fallen apart in an instant. But I didn't have time to break down. I needed to get out of there. I had to escape this circle of lies before it crushed me completely. I sat in my apartment, the soft yellow light casting shadows on the blank wall. Everything inside me felt like a raging storm, tearing through every corner of my mind. I had driven all night without a destination, just trying to outrun reality. But now, sitting alone, the pain hit harder than ever. Ryan had betrayed me. Emily had betrayed me. And now, Mark, Emily's fiancé, was the only one who didn't know the truth. I picked up my phone, scrolling to his name in my contacts. I didn't know Mark well, but I knew he was a good man, or, at least, someone who didn't deserve to be lied to like this. I hesitated for a second. If I told him, Emily's wedding would fall apart. My family would hate me even more. But if I stayed silent, Mark would walk into a marriage built on lies, completely unaware that his bride-to-be had kissed her sister's boyfriend just a week before their wedding. I took a deep breath and hit call. It rang twice before Mark picked up. Hello, Catherine? I gripped the phone tightly, trying to keep my voice steady. Mark, I need to talk to you, it's important. He was quiet for a second. What is it? I swallowed hard. It's about Emily. I heard a sigh on the other end. If she asked you to call me and apologize for the tension between you two, then I think... It's not that, I cut him off, my voice so serious it made him go quiet. Mark, I need you to listen to me without interrupting. There was a pause of silence before he finally replied. All right. I'm listening. I closed my eyes, focusing on every word I was about to say. Last night, I saw Ryan and Emily kissing. The air seemed to freeze. Even though I couldn't see Mark's face, I could imagine him going completely still, trying to process what I had just said. What did you say? His voice dropped. I saw it with my own eyes, I said slowly and clearly. It wasn't some accidental moment. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Emily and Ryan kissed like no one else in the world existed. A sharp exhale came through the phone. Are you sure? I gripped the phone tighter. I wish I weren't, but I saw everything, and when I confronted them, they couldn't deny it. Silence. I had no idea what Mark was thinking, but I could hear his heavy breathing through the line. Finally he spoke, his voice chillingly calm. Thank you for telling me. I frowned. So, what are you going to do? He paused again. I need time to think, I can't make a decision right now. I understood. If I were him, I'd probably need time too. Mark, I'm not saying this to ruin your wedding, but you deserve to know the truth. I know, he said quietly. I'll handle it my own way. And with that, the call ended. I set my phone down on the table, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. I had done the right thing. So why did it still hurt so much? In the days that followed, I didn't hear a single word from Mark. No messages, no calls. No sign that he had confronted Emily, or that the wedding was off. I wondered if Emily had managed to lie her way out of it again, like she had with my parents, with Ryan, and with everyone else who believed in the perfect image she crafted. I wondered if Mark loved her too much to see the truth, and would willingly walk into a marriage built on betrayal. That thought drove me insane. There was nothing I could do now but wait. But I knew one thing for sure. The truth couldn't stay buried forever. I woke up that morning with a strange, hollow feeling. Today was Emily's wedding day, but I wouldn't be there. I was supposed to be a bridesmaid. I was supposed to stand beside my sister as she walked down the aisle, smiling and offering my blessing for her marriage. But now, all I could do was watch everything from afar, an outsider in my own family. The afternoon passed in silence. I didn't check my phone. I didn't want to know anything about the ceremony. I just wanted to disconnect from the entire mess. But that evening, as I lay stretched out on the couch, my phone suddenly started buzzing nonstop. It was Emma, my cousin. My heart pounded when I saw her name. Emma never called me this much. Especially not on a day like today. I picked up, "Hello?" On the other end, Emma's voice was full of urgency. "Oh my God, Catherine, you're not going to believe what just happened." I sat up straight. What happened? Emma took a deep breath, like she still couldn't believe what she was about to say. Mark called off the wedding. Right at the altar. I froze. Minute, everything was normal. Emma spoke quickly, breathless with excitement. Emily walked down the aisle. Everyone was looking at her with admiration. She looked perfect in her white dress, like the whole world revolved around her. A chill ran down my spine. But when it got to the vows, Emma continued. Mark suddenly paused. He took a deep breath and looked Emily straight in the eye. I held my breath. And then, he said right there in front of everyone, that he couldn't marry a cheater. I was stunned. He said it loud and clear, every word. Emma continued, her voice still shaking. He said he knew everything, that Emily had cheated on him with Ryan, her sister's boyfriend. I sat frozen on the couch. Everyone was in shock. The whole church went silent for a few seconds. Then Emily started crying, yelling that it wasn't true. But Mark didn't listen. I swallowed hard, unsure of what I was supposed to feel in that moment. He said he couldn't marry someone like her, Emma went on, and then he turned around and walked out. Right in front of everyone. I sat there, unmoving, every word Emma said stirring a storm in my mind. Emily, the spoiled, favored sister, who always thought she could do anything without consequences, had been left at the altar, in the exact moment she believed she had won. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by a flood of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted her to face the consequences, but another part couldn't help but feel a sting of sadness. What happened after that? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Emma laughed. Your parents panicked. They rushed over to Emily asking what was going on, but she just sobbed and couldn't get a single word out. I could picture it clearly. My mom, eyes wide with shock, unable to believe her perfect daughter had just been exposed in front of everyone. He tried to salvage the situation, but Mark was already gone, and the guests started whispering and gossiping. I bit my lip, holding back the flood of emotions rising inside me. So what now? I asked. Emily ran out of the chapel, Emma said. She completely broke down. She screamed that it was all lies, that someone set her up. But no one believed her, Catherine. I took a deep breath, feeling relief for the first time in weeks. The truth was out. Emily might have manipulated my parents, might have fooled Ryan, but she couldn't control everyone. And in the end, Mark had made the right choice. I leaned back into the couch, letting everything I'd just heard sink in. So, are you okay? Emma asked, her voice softer now. I closed my eyes. I don't know. I couldn't say I was happy, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel crazy for trusting my own instincts. I put the phone down, but my heart still pounded in my chest. Emma's words replayed in my mind like a slow-motion film. Mark calling Emily out. The wedding collapsing. My parents panicking. My sister crying in front of everyone. The truth had finally come to light. I should have felt triumphant, but strangely, all I felt was a deep, aching emptiness. In the days that followed, I tried to live as normally as I could. I went to work, ate properly, even made time to exercise to keep my mind from drifting back into the past. But the pain lingered, dull and persistent like a wound that hadn't healed. I didn't hear from Emily, not a text, not a call. After everything, I was no longer the sister she could manipulate. My parents didn't reach out either. Maybe they were still busy cleaning up the mess their golden child had made. Or maybe they were too angry at me, convinced I was the one who ruined Emily's wedding. But I didn't care anymore. They chose to believe Emily over me. And that's not my fault. One afternoon I sat on the couch, watching the sunset stretch across the sky outside my window. I held my phone in my hand, scrolling through old messages between me and Ryan. Conversations, filled with laughter, sweet words that once felt so real. Now, it was all just ashes. I had loved Ryan, I had trusted him. But he chose to betray me. And Emily, the one person I should be able to count on, was the one who stabbed me in the back. I took a deep breath, then deleted every message. There was nothing left to hold on to. A week later, I decided to leave the city for a while. I booked a flight to the beach town I'd always wanted to visit but never had the chance. I needed a place to breathe, to let go of everything that had hurt me. Standing on that wide open beach, listening to the waves crashing on the shore, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. I was no longer trapped in a cycle of betrayal. I no longer had to exhaust myself trying to please a family that never truly valued me. I was free. But more than that, I had learned something important. My intuition was never wrong. I had felt something was off from the beginning, but I kept convincing myself I was just imagining it. I let others make me doubt my own judgment, only to be betrayed in the most painful way. But I would never let that happen again. I would trust myself. And from this moment on, I would live the life I deserve. Not for anyone else, but for me. Catherine's story is a powerful reminder of the value of intuition and self-respect. In life, we are often manipulated into doubting ourselves, into believing our discomfort is just paranoia. But the truth is, gut instincts rarely lie. Setting boundaries, even if it isolates us or draws criticism, is more important than living inside a web of deception. Not everyone deserves our trust, and sometimes losing people is the only way to truly find ourselves. What do you think about Catherine's story? Should she forgive her family or continue walking her own path? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional, thought-provoking stories about family, love, and life. If I had known what was waiting behind that door that day, maybe I wouldn't have walked in. I wouldn't have sat silently on that couch, watching a stranger rest her hand on my father's shoulder and smile like she'd just won some kind of game. But I was just an 8-year-old kid who had just lost her mom and was trying to survive in a world that suddenly felt cold as ice. I didn't know that from that moment on, every memory of my mother would begin to disappear from our home. Each photo frame, each painting, each trace of her. And I certainly never imagined I'd become a stranger in my own house. My mother, Karen, died of ovarian cancer just after I turned 8. It was the kind of loss no one can prepare for, especially when she had been the heart of our family, the one who made our home feel like spring, even in the snowy chill of December. After the funeral, my father, Richard Blake, quietly turned into someone else. He wasn't the cheerful man who used to read me fairy tales at bedtime anymore. He grew withdrawn, silent, his eyes always fixed on some distant place I couldn't reach. I used to believe that grief would bring us closer. I was wrong. Just 3 months after Mom passed, he introduced me to a special friend, Allison. She was his colleague at the law office, and from the first moment I saw the way her eyes clung to everything in our home, I felt a chill run down my spine. Allison will be joining us for dinner. She's very nice, my dad said, his voice gentle like he was reassuring me, but also like he was giving an order. That dinner was suffocating. Allison laughed too loudly, served food to my dad like they'd lived together for years, and didn't even bother to ask me what grade I was in. I stayed quiet, eyes fixed on the cold food on my plate. Feeling something inside me slowly crack. 2 months later, my dad and Allison got married in a small ceremony in the suburbs of Albany, New York. I wasn't asked. I didn't get to pick a dress. I didn't even know about the wedding until I was shoved into a car and driven to the church. "Allison is your new mother now," my dad said, as I stood hesitating in front of my mom's old bedroom door. A room now repainted a bland beige, stripped of everything that had once belonged to her, like she never existed. I didn't respond. I just stared at the wooden cabinet that once held our family photos. Now, it displayed shiny new wedding pictures, with Allison beaming like a queen. My mother was no longer on the walls, on the shelves, or anywhere. One day, I secretly opened the old storage drawer and found all her photos, notebooks, and jewelry crammed into an open cardboard box, shoved in a dusty corner of the attic. I told my father, "Stop digging up the past, Zoe," he said sharply. "Allison is the new member of this family. We need to move forward." But how could I move forward when my entire life was being smothered by a woman who always smiled fakely and whispered behind my back that I needed proper discipline? Allison started laying down house rules: no shoes by the door, no TV for more than 30 minutes a day, no closing my bedroom door without permission. She checked my backpack after school, called me lazy if I got a B instead of an A, and always said things like, "If your mom were still alive, she'd be ashamed of you." I cried. I cried a lot. But eventually, I learned to stay quiet, to live like a shadow. I thought if I behaved well enough, if I was good enough, maybe Dad would notice. Maybe he'd remember his promise to Mom, that he would love and protect me. But that moment never came. Every time I complained, he would say, "Listen to your mother, Zoe, she's doing everything for you." And that's when I knew my childhood officially ended that summer. The moment I was forced to call a woman who didn't love me, Mom. I still remember the day Allison told us she was pregnant. She placed her hand on her belly, her eyes sparkling like she was talking about a miracle. While I sat frozen at the breakfast table, spoonful of cereal stuck in mid-air. My dad looked like he had just won the lottery. He squeezed her shoulder and said something I'd never forget. Finally, a real family. I was only 10, but those words cut through my chest like a knife. What about me? What was I then? An inconvenient memory? A leftover trace of the woman they were trying to erase? From the day Allison got pregnant, I became nearly invisible. Every conversation in the house revolved around her growing belly. When Dad came home, he didn't ask about my day at school. He only worried whether Allison had eaten enough, if she had cramps, or if her back hurt. She began using pregnancy fatigue as an excuse to avoid everything, and I became the one doing it all. Washing dishes, doing laundry, vacuuming, scrubbing the floors. "Allison needs to rest," Dad said. "You're grown now, Zoe. Help your mother out." Mother? Since when did I have to call her that? Then Emma was born on a bone-chilling winter day in suburban Albany. I stood outside the delivery room, face pressed against the glass, watching my father cradle the tiny baby in his arms like a treasure. He had never looked at me that way. "Zoe, you're a big sister now," he said, the smile never leaving his face. "Will you help Mom take care of the baby?" I nodded. Not because I wanted to, but because I was too used to not being allowed to say no. But nothing prepared me for how my life would be pulled into a spiral of unfairness from that moment on. Allison started using me as her personal babysitter. Emma was hungry? I fed her. Emma had an accident? I changed her diaper. Emma cried at night? I rocked her to sleep. I learned to mix formula, to sing lullabies, to calm a flailing baby in the middle of a tantrum while my classmates were going to the movies or attending summer camp. And Allison? She painted her nails, went to the spa, and told her friends, "Zoe just loves the baby." She volunteered to help. Volunteered? I tried to push back. Once, I begged my dad to let me attend my best friend Hannah's birthday party, just for a few hours, after caring for Emma non-stop for 3 weeks. "Emma's teething, sweetheart." Allison cut in, her voice syrupy sweet. "She needs someone familiar around. If Zoe leaves, who will comfort her?" "Isn't Allison her mom too?" I asked, the first time I ever talked back. My dad's reply left me speechless. "Don't be rude, Zoe. Your mother has sacrificed a lot for you, don't be selfish." My mother? Since when did someone who never hugged me, never even asked how I was, get to be called that? Emma grew fast, and in no time, she learned how to manipulate people too. Any time she didn't get her way, she'd scream at the top of her lungs, throw herself on the floor, then point at me and yell, "Ellie hurt me." At first, Allison pretended to soothe us both. But it wasn't long before she fully embraced her role as the outraged mother. Each time, I'd be locked in my room for the entire weekend. No TV, no phone, no dessert. I still remember the day Emma spilled a whole carton of grape juice on the new rug. I had been studying in my room, but when Allison screamed, I was dragged into the living room like a criminal. "She's jealous," Allison declared. "Zoe can't stand that her little sister is more loved." Emma stood behind Allison, biting her lip, then shot me a smug look. A 4-year-old who already knew that a few simple words could turn me into the villain. And my father always took his wife's side. Always. "Zoe, you need to be more mature," he said robotically. "Emma's still young. You shouldn't be jealous." I wasn't jealous, I was just tired. Too tired to keep pretending I was fine. Pretending I was loved. Pretending I still belonged in this family. But I stayed quiet, still cooking porridge, picking up toys, and washing Emma's tiny dresses. Because I knew that any time I pushed back, I'd be labeled stubborn, selfish, ungrateful. I lived like that until I was 15, like a shadow next to that spoiled child. But I had no idea things were about to get much worse. I don't know how I would have survived without Grandma Rose. She was my mother's mother, the only one who kept any trace of my mom alive in the faded wallpaper fantasy world Allison had built. Every weekend, my dad dropped me off at her house, like fulfilling a duty rather than wanting me to feel loved. Grandma Rose's house was another world. A small wooden home on the edge of Albany, with lavender bushes around the fence and jazz music playing from an old radio every morning. There, I was sweetheart, eating pancakes with honey, without being scolded for too much sugar, allowed to speak loudly and be listened to with a full heart. "Just look at you," she'd say, brushing my hair with worried eyes. "Skin and bones like a coat hanger. What do they feed you over there?" I shrugged. How could I explain it all, when just hearing Allison's name made my chest ache? Days at Grandma's were the only days I felt alive. I baked, painted, read the books my mom used to love, things I wasn't allowed to touch at home. Emma came with me once, just once. That day, she threw a fit, demanding ice cream before dinner. When Grandma said, "There's no rule here that rewards tantrums," Emma screamed, slapped the table and threw herself on the floor. I braced myself, expecting Grandma to explode. But she didn't. She stood there, arms crossed, and said slowly, "I raised a wonderful daughter. I won't tolerate a rude child like this in my house." Emma's face turned pale, and when we got home, she told Allison everything. I had guessed there would be consequences, but I never imagined how brutal they would be. "Do you know my child cried the entire night?" Allison screamed in my grandmother's face, right at the doorstep, not even pretending to be polite. "You have no right to raise my child with your outdated ways." "Then who will raise Zoe?" my grandmother shot back, her voice sharp as a knife. "Or were you planning to drain her dry and toss her aside like a rag?" My father stood there in silence. No defense, not even a glance in my direction. That very evening, he called me to the living room. "From now on, you're not allowed to go to Grandma's house anymore," he said, like he was announcing something ordinary. I was stunned. Why? What did I do wrong? Allison feels uncomfortable with her meddling too much, and Emma doesn't get along with Grandma Rose. "But she's the only one in this house who loves me," I shouted, letting the emotion burst like a fire long suppressed. "Don't be disrespectful," my father barked. "If you try to see her again, you'll be grounded until the end of the term." I backed away, my heart pounding like a drum. I looked at him, the man who once promised my mom he'd protect me, now telling me to stop seeing the only person who still remembered who my mother was. From that day on, all contact with Grandma was cut off. Allison checked my phone every week, searched my backpack like a cop patting down a suspect. Weekends became a nightmare of babysitting Emma and cleaning the entire house in silence. I tried writing letters, secretly asking a classmate to deliver them, but I got caught. Allison ripped the letter up in front of me, sneering. "That old hag is toxic. This girl doesn't need her. She needs to focus on working, not living in fairy tales." I was locked in my room for 3 days. No books, no phone, no light beyond the dusty window pane. I sat curled up, whispering to myself, trying to remember the scent of her cinnamon apple pie, the sound of her slippers shuffling on the wooden floor, And the raspy laugh I loved so much it hurt. Every night, I dreamed I was running through her lavender garden, racing toward her sunlit porch, only to be yanked back by an invisible cord tightening around my wrist, refusing to let me go. I didn't know then that this was just the beginning of something even worse waiting ahead. I counted down every single day until graduation. Not because I loved school, or couldn't wait to wear the gown and get my diploma, but because to me, it was the only escape route. A way out of that suffocating house where I was nothing more than an unpaid servant to the little Princess Emma. I still remember the feeling of wearing that navy blue cap and gown, standing quietly among the loud crowd outside Albany Central High's stadium. My father didn't take pictures with me. Allison only showed up because my dad insisted, and Emma sat in the car, whining about the wait. After the ceremony, instead of celebrating like other families, I was summoned to the living room like a suspect, awaiting a verdict. Dad was already seated, his face heavy. Allison stood behind his chair, arms crossed, her eyes radiating something all too familiar. Control. "Zoe, sit down," he said, without looking at me. I sat. My hands gripped the diploma like it was the last thing keeping me sane. "We need to talk about college," he began. I nodded, heart filled with hope. "I applied to NYU and got accepted. I have a partial scholarship. I just need the remaining amount from Mom's fund, and I'm good to go." Allison curled her lip. "The thing is, we've reconsidered how that money will be used." I frowned. "That money is my mother's. She left it for me, no one else." My father leaned forward, voice flat like he was reading a sentence. "Emma also deserves a future. She'll be attending a good school and she'll need that fund. You should be more realistic." I jumped up. "What? I don't deserve a chance? What about the promise you made to Mom? You said you'd keep that money safe for me." Allison cut in coldly. "You don't get to make demands here, Zoe. This house doesn't operate on your fantasies." I turned to my dad, my voice shaking with rage. "So, all these years I endured everything for what? Just to be robbed of my future too?" "You're being ungrateful," my dad growled, and for the first time in my life he looked at me like I was the enemy. "If you can't show appreciation, then get out of this house. Tonight." No hesitation, no regret. I let out a bitter laugh, tears streaming down my face. So now it's out in the open. I was never really part of this family. Just a body that lived here, worked for free, without a voice. "Enough!" Allison shouted. "Pack your things, and leave." I ran to my room, heart aching, tears blinding me. I stuffed a few outfits, my phone, Mom's old letters, and the necklace Grandma gave me. The only thing I had left after all these years. Emma stood at the door, holding her new iPad, raising an eyebrow. "Where are you going? Finally getting kicked out?" I looked at her. No sadness left. Just emptiness. "Enjoy it. You're the last one who still believes this family is real." I walked down the stairs without turning back. When the door shut behind me, the June night wind slapped my face like a wake-up call. I stood there a long time under the faded streetlight, not knowing where to go. I had no place, no money, no one. Except one person. I pulled out my phone, hands trembling. Even though she had been banned from contacting me, I still remembered the number. I dialed, whispering a prayer. "Hello?" Grandma Rose's voice answered, raspy but strong. I burst into tears. "It's me, Zoe. I have nowhere else to go." There was a pause. Then she said the one sentence I will never forget. "All right, sweetheart, come home to Grandma." I arrived at Grandma Rose's house just before midnight. The porch light was still on, as if she knew I'd come. When she opened the door, I ran into her arms like the 8-year-old I used to be, buried my face in her shoulder and cried like never before. She didn't ask many questions, just whispered, "You're home now." 3 days later, I started my life over. From zero. No money, no school, no clear plan. but for the first time in years, I felt like I had a choice. Grandma Rose, with the firm voice of someone who had lived long enough to reject injustice, said clearly, "They will not destroy your future. Your mother dreamed of seeing you in college. Now I will help make that dream real." I didn't want to be a burden. So I started job hunting that very first week. Every afternoon, after walking all over Albany with a resume printed at the public library, I knocked on the doors of diners, bakeries, and bookstores. On the 5th day, I stopped in front of a small corner restaurant, Maple and Sage. The storefront was cozy, the menu handwritten, and the smell of grilled meat drifting from the kitchen was mouth-watering. I stepped inside, my heart pounding. The manager, Connie, was a woman in her 40s, with red hair and eyes sharp as razor blades. "Ever worked in a restaurant before?" she asked, flipping through my resume. I shook my head. "I learn fast. And I need this job. Really need it." Connie stared at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. "All right. Start with the dinner shift. Don't break anything." And just like that, I became a waitress. The uniform was a black button-up shirt, a wine-colored apron, and a permanent smile, even when my knees went numb and customers snapped because their appetizer was 3 minutes late. I worked 6 days a week, night shifts, from 4 in the afternoon to 11 at night. I always came home with burning feet, and the smell of fryer oil stuck in my hair, but I felt alive. No more contemptuous stares from Allison. No more vicious glares from Emma. Just me, and a tray full of plates I had to deliver at lightning speed. One evening, at the end of August, while wiping down tables, I overheard a group of college students at a nearby table talking about the night program at Albany City College. One of them was studying business administration. Working and studying, with classes running, either from 8 in the morning to noon, or from 6 to 9 in the evening. I went home, opened Grandma's old laptop, looked up the information, and couldn't take my eyes off the screen. I knew exactly what I wanted. A college degree, a second chance, a real beginning. The next day, I told Grandma Rose. She didn't ask why. She only asked, how much. Tears welled up in my eyes. "You've already done so much for me." "Not enough," she interrupted, her gaze firm. "I saved up that retirement money. It's not for admiring. It's for changing your life." I enrolled in the morning classes so I could keep the evening shift. Every day started at 6 in the morning, with a strong cup of coffee and textbooks stacked higher than the table. I studied math, economics, principles of management. At noon I grabbed a sandwich in the library, then caught the bus to the restaurant. I dozed off on textbooks, skipped dinners, and cried while walking because I was too exhausted to remember my way home. But I never wanted to quit. Because I knew. Every word, every formula, every page I studied was a perfect payback for the years they tried to crush me. I was no longer the old Zoe who cried behind closed doors. I was Zoe, the nighttime waitress, morning student, and survivor. And I knew one thing for sure. The time would come when I wouldn't just survive, I would win. I had just finished my shift when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number popped up. "Hi Zoe, just wanted to give you a heads up. Emma just booked a graduation dinner at your restaurant. She's bragging about showing everyone her poor waitress sister. Melanie R., my mom's old friend and our former neighbor." I stood frozen in the back kitchen of Maple and Sage, gripping my phone, my throat as dry as sandpaper. Emma. That name sliced through every memory I'd tried to bury. For months, I had blocked every social media account linked to my old family, but word still got around. Photos of Emma in designer dresses, driving a new car, posing in front of a fancy university, all paid for by the money my mother had left for me. The money they had stolen without remorse. And now, that girl wanted to bring her whole group to my workplace. For what? To mock me? To prove I was the failure and she was the pride of the family? No. Absolutely not. I walked straight into the manager's office, where Connie was reviewing the weekend reservation list. "Connie?" I said, my voice unnaturally calm. Can I see the Saturday night booking list? She didn't ask many questions, just leaned aside and typed a few keys. And just like the message said, Emma Blake, party of 10, graduation celebration, requests server, named Zoe. The last line hit me in the gut like a punch. Connie glanced at me. Who is she? She used to be my half-sister, I replied. And she's trying to turn me into a joke. Connie frowned. Want me to cancel the reservation? I shook my head, a small smile tugging at my lips. No need, I've got a better idea. Saturday night arrived fast. The restaurant was glowing as usual and everyone was busy. I changed into my uniform, but not the servers. I wore a simple but elegant black dress, my hair neatly tied up, high heels on, and pinned carefully to my chest, a new name tag. Zoe Blake, Operations Manager. I had been promoted 2 weeks earlier. A well-earned reward after nearly 2 years of non-stop work and completing my night school business program. I stepped out of the office and scanned the restaurant, which was packed with dinner parties. And then, I saw them. Emma entered first, wearing a blazing red dress and walking like the floor was her personal runway. Behind her came Allison in an elaborate white suit, and my father, looking older, with noticeably grayer hair. Emma's friends giggled, phones already in hand to capture the so-called glorious moment. I stood behind the bar, watching them walk to the reserved table near the fireplace, the best seat in the house. Excuse me, where's our server? Emma said loudly, making sure everyone heard her. I specifically requested my sister. She still works here, right? A few curious glances turned my way. I took a deep breath and stepped out with the most confident stride I could manage. Good evening, I said with a professional smile. I'm Zoe, the operations manager of the restaurant tonight. If you need anything, please feel free to let me or our service staff know. The atmosphere dropped instantly. Emma froze. What the? She stammered. You're the manager here? Since 3 weeks ago, I replied. Thanks to strong academics, and a little humility, I gave a quick glance toward my father. Allison grabbed Emma's hand and forced a smile. Oh, that's wonderful, Zoe. Still in the service industry though, right? Yes, and I'm also working toward my MBA, I said, smiling sharply. Unlike some people, who live off someone else's money to buy dresses and show off cars. My father opened his mouth to say something, but I had already turned away. Enjoy your dinner. And don't forget to try the signature steak. I'm the one who trained the chef for that dish. I walked back behind the bar, hearing murmurs of confusion behind me. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to live better than them. And tonight, I had. Emma wasn't done. Right after I introduced myself as the manager, she shattered the silence with a mocking laugh, like she'd just heard the most ridiculous joke. Then, in front of all her friends and the guests who were now curiously watching, Emma put her hands on her hips and raised an eyebrow. Manager? Then how about you, dear waitress? Bring out the wine. And stand up straight, will you? We wouldn't want people thinking your restaurant hires from a homeless shelter. I felt every stare land on me. A few awkward chuckles came from Emma's table, but most of the room stayed silent. My staff had started pausing too, glancing from behind the bar to see how I'd react. I calmly walked toward their table, stopping just a few steps away. Emma, I said, my voice low but clear enough to carry across the still room. I'm not your server anymore. And I'm not someone you get to boss around, like when I was locked in that house. Her eyes widened. Allison leaned forward slightly, clearly trying to intervene. But I wasn't finished. I'm a co-owner of this restaurant. 35% of the shares are in my name, thanks to the investment of someone who believed in me when my entire family turned their backs. I turned and signaled for the door in the back to open. And then, Grandma Rose stepped in. She didn't have to say a word. Just the sight of her slender frame, white hair pinned up, and those classic leather shoes gave me a strength nothing could shake. Emma's entire table fell silent. Grandma Rose walked straight to my side and placed her hand on my shoulder. Her voice rang out, sharp as a blade but full of love. "That's right. I'm the one who put up the money. Because I saw something none of you ever did. The grit and strength in this granddaughter of mine." She looked directly at Richard. "My father. You once promised my daughter you'd protect Zoe. Instead, you handed her future to a selfish child and threw her out with nothing." Hassan shot up. "That's enough, you don't have the right to lecture us." Grandma Rose cut her off, her eyes cold as steel. "I have every right when I'm the one who rebuilt the future you tried to destroy." Emma's face turned bright red. "You're just biased. I'm the one who succeeded here. I graduated top of my class and got into a top law firm. Thanks to whose money?" I cut her off coldly. "The money my mother left for me. While I was waiting tables, studying at night, and sleeping 2 hours a day to graduate with honors in business administration. Not a single dollar came from my so-called loving family." People all around had started to look, some diners even stood up murmuring. Emma clenched her fists, eyes burning. "Why are you saying this, just to humiliate me in front of my friends?" "No," I replied, my voice lowering. "I just want to end the play you've been staging. You don't get to define who I am anymore. I am not the poor waitress sister. I'm the operations manager of the very restaurant you chose to flaunt in. And from now on, I decide who gets to step through these doors." That line was the final blow. Grandma Rose stood with her arms crossed, as steady as a pillar in a storm. "I've rewritten my will. All my assets, my house, stocks, savings, belong to Zoe. I don't need a reason. I just need fairness." Richard, who had been silent the whole time, finally looked up. His face was etched with deep lines. "Zoe, I didn't know it would go this far." I looked at him. The man who once held me after Mom died, now a stranger. "You didn't know? Or you never cared enough to find out?" Silence fell over the room. I took a deep breath and looked Emma in the eyes. "Your party can still go on if you want. But if your goal was to humiliate me, then tonight was a failure. You walked into my restaurant, ate food prepared by my team, and got overshadowed by the truth." Grandma Rose smiled and tilted her head. "But if you'd rather leave, the door's right over there." Emma tightened her grip on her purse, looking around for someone to defend her. No one said a word. Not a single person. Since that night, I hadn't heard a word from Emma for nearly a year. No texts, no calls. Not even second-hand gossip. Until one fall morning, while I was in a meeting with architects about remodeling the new Maple and Sage location in downtown Schenectady, my phone buzzed with a name I thought I had buried for good. Richard Blake. I stared at the screen for 3 seconds. Then I declined the call, no hesitation. I was no longer the girl trembling on someone else's doorstep with nowhere to go. I was Zoe Blake. The woman who turned every tear into bricks to rebuild her life. After that fateful night at the restaurant, Emma was rejected by the law firm due to behavior inconsistent with company values, according to an internal employee who messaged me on LinkedIn. Allison was removed from her role in a local women's organization after her online backlash, following the viral video of Grandma Rose speaking the truth. And me? I quietly opened the second branch of the restaurant. Then, the third. Each one bore my signature, from the layout to the signature dishes. I didn't broadcast on social media or seek the spotlight. I just worked. Every day, every hour, every decision was a step away from my past. Grandma Rose was there for every grand opening. She always sat at the first table, ordered the chocolate soufflé, and clapped proudly when I walked out to applause. "You don't need anyone else," she once said, gripping my hand. "You only need yourself." And she was right. I moved into a penthouse on the 18th floor, with glass walls facing the Hudson River. Every morning, I brewed coffee, and watched the sunlight spill across the streets where I once handed out resumes. And each time, I whispered just one line. Thank you for not giving up. I still got messages from Richard. Once, after he saw me on the cover of Business Women of the Year. I'm so proud of you, he wrote. I never responded. Another time, when Allison was hospitalized after a minor stroke, he called, left a voicemail. Zoe, I know I was wrong. Emma's trying to change too. We all want to see you. Please, give us a chance. I never called back. Because some doors once closed are better left that way. I don't hate them anymore. I just don't cast them in any role in my life ever again. What I needed wasn't forgiveness. It was freedom. One Saturday night, after the dinner rush ended, I stood behind the bar with Grandma Rose. We raised our glasses of pomegranate juice. What did you used to dream about when you were little? She asked. I smiled, my eyes drifting toward the wide window. I used to dream of a place where no one told me to clean up, no one searched through my things, no one told me I was worthless. A place where I could live with my head held high. And now? I turned to her and squeezed her hand tighter. Now I'm living that dream, Grandma. I still keep my mother's old photo box on my desk. The one thing from my past I brought with me. Inside is a picture of her and me when I was little, both of us smiling brightly in the lavender garden. I don't need them to come back to validate my worth. I carved my own path and named each step of the way myself. I am Zoe Blake. No longer the child waiting behind a door for someone to notice her. I am the one writing the next chapter of my life. And the old one? The chapter of hurt, lies, and manipulation is closed for good. Zoe's story is a clear reminder that sometimes, family isn't where safety begins, but where the deepest wounds are born. But instead of letting the past define her, Zoe chose to rise and rebuild her life with willpower and self-respect. She didn't need forgiveness from those who betrayed her, only a chance to prove her own worth. The greatest lesson from her journey: some chapters must be closed forever, so better ones can begin. What do you think about Zoe's journey? Was she right to cut ties with her old family to find herself again? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and healing.